Ready to dive into custom water cooling but unclear about what parts you might need? Check out Thermaltake's new M360 Plus RGB kit. Featuring a D5 pump res combo, 16mm hard tube, Pacific C Pro fittings, and the best RGB implementation on the market, the M360 Plus fits all mainstream Intel and AMD sockets and is fully expandable as your system evolves. Check out the link in the video description to learn more.
Just a little side note, I hope you guys enjoyed that intro because that 15 seconds of silent footage took me 2 hours to edit. Welcome to the BPS Customs review of the Thermaltake Level 20 GT RGB Plus. Now, that's a lot of words, but this is a lot of case. From here on out, we'll just call it the Level 20 GT because what makes it RGB Plus should be pretty apparent by now. I first saw the enormous, impractical show build inside the Thermaltake Level 20 at CES this year. And since then, they've showed off a slightly refined version of that extremely niche product and also 3 cases derived from it that carried over the same design language and feel. It's almost as if the Level 20 split itself into 3 more practical versions. And we got the VT, the XT, and this case, the GT. The VT and the XT are more cube-style designs with a horizontal motherboard orientation, while the GT is your traditional ATX full tower. And man, does the word full ever apply here. The last case I reviewed before this was the excellent Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900 Rev 2. And it also was classified as a full tower with similar eATX motherboard support and a wide open design that invited custom water cooling. But the Level 20, while being just about the same height and width, has a much larger footprint due to tacking on at least 1.5 inches of depth. Not to mention that while the lower third of the Dark Base's interior layout was occupied by a full-length power supply shroud, the Level 20 only has a partial shroud, and the rest of the case is left open for storage options or to allow for the mounting of a pump and reservoir. In fact, Thermaltake has included a built-in pump bracket with adjustable positioning that you can take advantage of, or just remove it if you think it gets in the way. While we're on the topic of water cooling, let's talk about clearance. There's absolutely tons of it, both at the top and on the front of the case. And Thermaltake has done something really great with the fan mounting solution here. As you can clearly see, the front of the Level 20 comes pre-populated with 2 200mm Ring Plus RGB fans. As most water coolers know, finding a 200mm radiator is extremely difficult, if not impossible. So if you were to go full custom loop in here, most people would just assume, oh, well, I guess I have to take these fans out and replace them. But Thermaltake is one step ahead of you guys, I guess, and includes in the box 4 brackets that help mate the 200mm fans, which look great, to either a 120mm or 140mm size radiator. You can do this at the front or at the top of the case, meaning if you wanted to grab 2 more of those giant RGB fans for the top to make everything look symmetrical, you can do that as well. In total, you can fit a 360 rad up top, a 420 at the front, and then if you are really feeling frisky, you can also populate the rear wall with up to a 420. That's more cooling than any system realistically would need, not to mention that you can also do push-pull on the front and on the top. Because you can mount fans on the outside of the chassis rails, there is plenty of space for thick rads here as well, provided you're willing to remove the included 4-sled drive cage that comes pre-installed right in that spot right there. If you need to do this, but also are worried about your storage options, just turn the case around where you'll find room for an additional 3 hard drives or 6 SSDs mounted flush to the back of the motherboard tray. This area back here provides an absolutely enormous amount of depth. So no matter how many crazy peripherals you have plugged in or how much cabling you need to run, closing up the rear glass panel should be absolutely no problem. You'll also probably want to mount the included fan control hub back here somewhere, as you'll need it to plug in the Ring Plus fans with their proprietary connector. I know that in the past I've had kind of mixed feelings about buying fans that you can only use one way, but if you are immersed in the Thermaltake ecosystem and all of your fans can take advantage of the single hub, it actually seems like a bonus. You only have to worry about running one cable from each fan, and the length of that cable means that you can neatly tie it down basically wherever you want, because it is very long. Returning to the main area, I do wish Thermaltake had capped off this shroud. After all, you're not really meant to be running cables out the end of it, and I think it looks much cleaner that way. I think Corsair learned from a similar mistake with the 570X. On the top of the shroud, we see a vertical GPU mount, and in fact, there are two of them here. The way Thermaltake is able to accommodate that much expansion slot room in a vertical orientation is that the expansion slot cover panel is actually completely rotatable, and it's surprisingly easy to do. Just remove a couple of screws at the back, detach it, rotate it, and reseat it. They don't provide you with PCIe riser cables, so if you do plan on utilizing this feature, be sure to grab one in your shopping cart before you check out. Because you have the option of utilizing any of the 8 bays back here, you can mount your GPU far enough away from the side panel so as not to choke off airflow, which can be an issue with some vertical mounts. The motherboard tray area is quite large and can easily fit extended ATX motherboards, although doing so will cover up the cable routing grommets. We can also see here that there are flex mounting spots for fans, pumps, radiators, or reservoirs, or whatever you want to mount to that back wall. I don't usually talk about the exterior of a case last, but I kind of wanted to build up to it as this is a fairly polarizing, bold design. The curved silver accent pieces combined with the 4 tempered glass panels create a unique visual, as does the split I/O on top. To the left side, or the side most likely to be facing a user, there's a headphone and mic jack, power and reset buttons, and a hard drive activity light. On the right side is all the connectivity, 2 USB 2.0 and 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports, and 1 additional Type C, although this is not 3.1 Gen 2. It's just the standard USB 3.0 and uses the same USB 3.0 header plug. So if you want to be able to use all the front panel USB ports, you'll need 2 available USB 3.0s on your motherboard. This is a little disappointing, and I'm not sure why Thermaltake made this choice, but at least having the Type-C form factor is a plus, I guess, but I definitely would have rather seen 3.1 Gen 2 here. I definitely do not like the fact that they're facing away from me as I'm sitting at my desk, however, as due to the size of this tower, there's almost no way I wouldn't have to get up out of my chair to plug in something to the USB ports, which really kind of defeats the purpose of front panel connectors. Through the tinted tempered glass on the front and the top, you can see full-length dust filtration, which is actually attached to the panels themselves. If you want to remove it for cleaning, you certainly can, although Thermaltake doesn't make it particularly easy, as you actually have to bust out the screwdriver to do so. The filter on the bottom of the chassis, however, slides out from the back, just like you might expect. Thermals on my Ryzen 7 2700X test system were overall very reasonable, even though I'm using the stock Wraith Prism cooler. And I think it likely has to do with the fact that the interior is just so cavernous that hot air has more room to expand and isn't necessarily trapped up against components. I used a blower style GPU, as you could clearly see, and that probably also helped as I wasn't recirculating hot air coming off of the graphics card during gaming loads. Airflow pathways look limited next to the glass panes, but there are additional cutouts at the bottom of the front panel and at the rear of the top panel that definitely do help, as they are pretty wide open. Also, don't underestimate the fact that, just like on the View 71 chassis, the gaps here are not obstructed by anything like filters or supports. So despite the spaces being narrow, their length and lack of impedance should provide enough fresh air to the interior. Of note is the fact that if you really think you need to open things up, the glass on the top and on the front is removable from the panels by undoing 4 screws. Although this isn't mentioned anywhere or recommended by Thermaltake in any place that I could see, so I'm not sure if this was the intended operation here, but still, it works just fine. Hey guys, just finishing up this edit, and as I'm going through all the footage, I realized that I never touched on acoustics, so I wanted to really briefly talk about that. Now, as it comes configured from the factory, the Level 20 has those 2 really big 200mm fans up front. They spin at a fairly low RPM, and as a result, the case as it comes configured is actually pretty quiet. However, just be aware that there are no panels with sound dampening foam,
and all of the glass panes are separated from the chassis by almost a full centimeter on the entire perimeter. So as a result, if you were to jam this thing full of 120 or 140 millimeter fans, say for a really big custom water cooling loop, or even if you just wanted to get more airflow in there, you're probably going to face a situation where things get a little bit noisy. I haven't yet done that exact experiment on this case. However, I have worked with other cases with similar cooling configurations like the Corsair 570X and the Thermaltake View 71, where all the airflow is generated by glass panes raised from the case. So I am aware that when you get a lot of cooling inside one of these cases, things can get a little bit loud, just because there's really nothing blocking the noise from exiting and smacking you in the face. So just be aware of that acoustics are probably not the best on this case if you were to put a lot of fans in it. However, as it is right now, it's actually pretty good. At $189, a case vendor really needs to be offering something special to justify that price in a market that contains plenty of good options at half the cost. The Level 20 GT, I think, mostly succeeds here. As Thermaltake evolves its product lineup, it's extremely obvious to anybody who's handled their cases over the past few years that materials are getting more premium, aesthetics are pushing boundaries, and their releases at multiple price points are becoming more enticing. If I take it back to the Dark Base Pro 900, which I think competes in largely the same segment as the Level 20 GT will, the Dark Base offers more polished design choices and material integration with better acoustics and almost a refined sense of style. The steel feels a little thicker, and even the plastics feel a little less plasticky. The Level 20 goes in a completely opposite direction though. It's bold, different, and big. It has better airflow and comes in significantly cheaper, including nice touches like the fully rotatable expansion bays. They can both fit a monster amount of hardware, and I think people looking to buy them will just have a plan to do exactly that. I'd be excited to see what kind of builds are possible in the Level 20 GT, as it is a case that I really like, and I bet come CES 2019, Thermaltake's suite will be jam-packed with modders who have taken advantage of the new flagship. So that's it for this review, guys. Let me know what you think down below in the comments of the Thermaltake Level 20 GT RGB Plus case. It'll be available on September 1st, so are you planning on picking one up? Also, don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you like this kind of content, and check out my brand new merchandise store linked down in the description. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.